Marcus's appearance in Westminster Magistrates Court drew more media attention than most celebrity hearings. Photographers lined the courthouse steps as he was brought in through a side entrance, flanked by security officers and his solicitor. The young man who had wanted to create viral content had certainly achieved his goal, though not in the way he had ever imagined. Magistrate Elizabeth Thornberry presided over the brief hearing with the stern efficiency of someone who had seen decades of cases pass through her courtroom. As the charges were read aloud, criminal damage to Crown property, reckless endangerment, and public disorder, Marcus felt each word like a physical blow. The formal language of the law made his morning's adventure sound far more sinister than he had ever intended. "How do you plead to these charges, Mr. Henderson?" the magistrate asked, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. Marcus's voice cracked as he answered, "Not guilty, Your Honor," though even his solicitor had warned him that the evidence against him was overwhelming. The plea was more about buying time to negotiate a favorable sentence than any realistics. Hope of acquittal. Bail was set at £50,000, an amount that represented more money than Marcus had ever seen in one place. His passport was confiscated, effectively trapping him in the United Kingdom until the case was resolved. The conditions were strict: daily reporting to a local police station, no contact with any palace staff or guards, and absolutely no social media activity related to the incident. Outside the courthouse, Marcus faced the media storm he had inadvertently created. Reporters shouted questions as he and his solicitor pushed through the crowd. "Do you regret your actions, Mr. Henderson? What do you say to people calling you the most disrespectful tourist in history? Are you worried about going to prison?" The barrage of questions was overwhelming, and Marcus kept his head down, saying nothing. The case became a sensation on both sides of the Atlantic. Late-night talk show hosts used Marcus as material for their monologues. Social media was filled with memes about the tourist who torched a guard, and serious discussions emerged about tourist behavior and respect for cultural institutions. Marcus found himself at the center of debates he never wanted to be part of. Lance Corporal Davies, the guard whose uniform had been damaged, recovered fully from his minor burns and returned to duty within days. In interviews, he maintained the dignified professionalism expected of the Queen's Guard, stating simply that he hoped the incident would remind all visitors about the importance of respecting royal traditions and maintaining appropriate behavior around serving personnel. 6 months later, Marcus accepted a plea bargain that included a suspended prison sentence, community service, and full restitution for the damaged uniform, a cost that exceeded £15,000 when expert craftsmanship and historical significance were factored in. He was also banned from entering any royal property for 5 years and required to make a public apology. The incident fundamentally changed Marcus's life in ways that extended far beyond the legal consequences. His job in Phoenix was terminated when the company decided his notoriety made him unsuitable for client-facing work. His relationship with Sarah ended as the stress and media attention proved too much to bear. The social media following he had been so eager to build became a constant reminder of his mistake, with his name permanently associated with one of the most embarrassing tourist incidents in recent memory. Years later, Marcus would reflect on how 30 seconds of poor judgment had altered the entire trajectory of his life. The lesson was harsh but clear. Actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve disrespecting institutions that represent centuries of tradition and the people who dedicate their lives to protecting them. His story became a cautionary tale told to tourists around the world, a reminder that the pursuit of viral fame can sometimes lead to infamy instead. The transport from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Magistrates Court took only 20 minutes, but for Marcus, it felt like a journey into another world entirely. Handcuffed in the back of a police van, he watched London pass by through the small window, seeing the city he had been so excited to explore now as the backdrop to his legal troubles. At the police station, Marcus went through the formal booking process that thousands of defendants experience every day. His fingerprints were taken, photographs were captured from multiple angles, and his personal belongings were cataloged and stored. The Arizona State t-shirt that had made him stand out among the tourists that morning was replaced with standard custody clothing as he was processed into the system. His phone call to Sarah back in Phoenix was heartbreaking. Through tears and static, he tried to explain what had happened, but the story sounded even more unbelievable over a crackling international connection. "You did what?" Sarah kept repeating, her voice a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Marcus, how could you be so stupid? Do you realize what this means for us, for your job, for everything?" The duty solicitor assigned to Marcus's case was a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Hartley, who had been dealing with weekend arrests for over a decade. She reviewed the charges with the weary professionalism of someone who had seen every possible variety of human foolishness. "Mr. Henderson, I have to be honest with you. This is about as serious as it gets for a tourist offense. You've damaged Crown property and endangered a serving member of the armed forces." News crews were already gathering outside the courthouse as word spread about the unusual case. The story had everything journalists loved: an American tourist, the royal family, dramatic footage, and consequences that seemed almost too severe to believe. By evening, Marcus's face would be on news broadcasts across 2 continents. Inside his cell, Marcus sat on the narrow bench and tried to make sense of his situation. Less than 12 hours earlier, he had been just another excited tourist with plans to see the sights and take some photos. Now he was facing criminal charges that could result in a prison sentence and a permanent criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. The prosecution team was already assembling their case, gathering evidence from multiple sources: the witness testimonies from dozens of tourists, the security camera footage from around the palace, the expert assessment of the damaged uniform, and the medical report on Lance Corporal Davies all painted a clear picture of what had happened and why it was so serious. Jennifer Hartley returned to brief Marcus on what would happen next. "The court session tomorrow will be brief, mainly to enter your plea and set bail conditions. But Mr. Henderson, you need to understand that this case will likely drag on for months. The media attention alone means the prosecution will want to make an example of your case." As night fell over London, Marcus lay on the thin mattress in his cell, staring at the ceiling and wondering how one moment of careless stupidity had destroyed his life so completely. In Phoenix, Sarah was fielding calls from reporters who had somehow gotten her number, all wanting to know more about the American tourist who torched a royal guard. The story was snowballing beyond anything either of them could have imagined. The incident that had lasted less than 30 seconds that morning was now generating consequences that would ripple through Marcus's life for years to come, affecting his career, his relationships, and his future in ways he was only beginning to understand. The security office at Buckingham Palace buzzed with activity as Marcus sat in a stark white room, his hands trembling as he tried to process the magnitude of his situation. Through the small window, he could see police vehicles arriving, their blue lights flashing against the palace walls. What had started as a fun tourist adventure was rapidly becoming a legal nightmare that would follow him for years. Detective Inspector Sarah Walsh entered the room with a thick folder and a recording device. Her expression was professional but stern as she sat across from Marcus at the metal table. "Mr. Henderson, I need to inform you that you are being arrested on suspicion of criminal damage to Crown property and reckless endangerment of a public servant." Marcus felt his stomach drop as the formal charges were read to him. The words seemed to echo in the small room. "You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." These were phrases he had only heard in movies, never imagining they would be directed at him in real life. "I want to call my girlfriend," Marcus said weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. "And maybe the American embassy? This is all just a huge misunderstanding." Detective Walsh nodded and made a note, but her expression remained unchanged. She had dealt with similar cases before, though none quite as dramatic as setting fire to a Royal Guard's uniform. The questioning began in earnest, with Detective Walsh methodically going through the events of the morning. Marcus's story sounded increasingly foolish as he tried to explain his intentions, his words tumbling over each other as panic set in. "I was just trying to make good content for my followers. I never meant to hurt anyone. The wind just caught the flame and—" Meanwhile, news of the incident was already spreading across London and beyond. The palace press office was fielding calls from journalists around the world, all wanting details about the American tourist who had set fire to a Queen's Guard. Social media was exploding with videos and photos taken by witnesses, and Marcus's name was beginning to trend on various platforms for all the wrong reasons. Back in Phoenix, Sarah Martinez was getting ready for work when her phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends were sending her links to news articles and social media posts about her boyfriend's incident. At first, she thought it was a joke or a case of mistaken identity, but as more details emerged, including photos of Marcus being led away by security, the horrible truth became clear. The damaged uniform was being carefully examined by experts who would later testify about its historical significance and the cost of replacement. The red woolen tunic wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was part of a tradition dating back centuries, crafted using specific techniques and materials that made it irreplaceable. The financial impact alone would be substantial, but the cultural significance made the damage even more serious. In the security office, Marcus was learning about the British legal system the hard way. Detective Walsh explained that he would be transported to a local police station for formal processing, and that a court appearance was imminent. The Crown Prosecution Service takes offenses against royal property very seriously, Mr. Henderson. This isn't something that will simply go away with an apology. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to understand that his London vacation had become something entirely different. The tourist who had arrived that morning full of excitement and social media ambitions was gone, replaced by a defendant in a case that would make international headlines. Within seconds, palace security surrounded Marcus as fire extinguishers appeared from seemingly nowhere. The affected guard was quickly assisted by his colleagues, who helped strip away the burning portions of his uniform while medical personnel rushed to assess any injuries. The flames were extinguished rapidly, but the damage was done, both to the historic uniform and to Marcus's future. Marcus stood frozen against the railings, his face pale with shock as he watched the controlled chaos around him. Security officers were barking orders into their radios while tourists continued to scatter, many filming the incident with their phones. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Marcus, who had been trying to create viral content, was now the unwilling star of dozens of videos that would indeed spread across the internet. "Sir, step away from the barriers immediately," commanded a stern-faced security officer who appeared beside Marcus. The man's voice cut through Marcus's panic like ice water. "Keep your hands visible and move slowly toward the gate." Marcus's legs felt like jelly as he stumbled backward, his mind racing to process what had just happened. The injured guard, whose name was Lance Corporal Davies, was being examined by medics who had arrived within minutes. Fortunately, his thick, ceremonial gloves and quick reactions had prevented serious burns, but his forearm showed red marks where the flames had reached his skin. The centuries-old uniform, however, was ruined beyond repair. The red woolen tunic, which had been crafted by traditional methods and had served in countless ceremonies, now bore a large charred hole along the sleeve. Marcus tried to explain himself, as more security officers arrived. "It was an accident. I was just making a video. I didn't mean for this to happen." His voice cracked with emotion as the reality of the situation sank in. The lighter lay forgotten on the ground where he had dropped it, a small piece of evidence that would soon be collected and catalogued. A senior security official approached Marcus with a grim expression. "Sir, you need to come with us immediately. This is a very serious matter." The man's tone left no room for argument. Marcus looked around desperately, hoping to find some sympathy among the gathering crowd, but saw only shocked faces and pointing fingers. As they escorted him away from the scene, Marcus could hear tourists talking in hushed, excited voices about what they had witnessed. Some were already posting to social media, sharing videos and photos of the incident in real time. The viral content Marcus had been seeking was indeed being created, but he was now the villain of the story, rather than the hero he had imagined himself to be. The walk to the security office felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. Each step took him further from his carefree tourist adventure and closer to consequences he had never imagined possible. Behind him, the palace staff worked efficiently to restore order, but the morning's events had set in motion a series of legal proceedings that would dominate the news cycle for days to come. Marcus' phone remained on the ground where he had dropped it, still recording until its battery died, capturing nothing but pavement and the sound of distant sirens as emergency. Services continued to respond to the incident he had caused. Marcus pulled out a small disposable lighter from his pocket, the same one he had used to light candles during his romantic dinner in Paris just 3 days earlier. The idea hit him like lightning. He would create a dramatic flame effect in his video, holding the lighter near his face while talking about the fire of British tradition. It seemed perfect in his mind, a creative way to make his content stand out from thousands of other tourist videos. "All right, guys, check this out," Marcus announced to his phone camera, flicking the lighter to life. The small flame danced in the gentle morning breeze as he held it up between himself and the motionless guard. "We're going to talk about the burning passion of British history." He thought he was being clever, creating what he imagined would be a memorable moment for his followers. The wind picked up slightly, and Marcus had to cup his hand around the flame to keep it from going out. He was so focused on his performance that he didn't notice he was leaning closer to the railings, or that the guard's perfectly maintained uniform was now just inches away from the open flame. The morning breeze that had seemed so gentle moments before was now creating unpredictable currents of air. "These guards have been protecting the royal family for centuries." Marcus continued his impromptu documentary, gesturing wildly with the lighter still burning in his hand. "Nothing can break their concentration. They're like human torches of dedication." The irony of his words would become painfully clear in just seconds. A sudden gust of wind caught Marcus off guard, pushing him slightly forward against the railings. His hand, still gripping the lighter, moved closer to the guard's red woolen tunic. The flame flickered violently in the breeze, and for a moment, Marcus thought it would go out entirely. Instead, something far worse happened. The flame found the edge of the guard's uniform sleeve. The red wool, treated with traditional methods and dried by the morning air, caught fire immediately. What started as a tiny spark quickly spread along the fabric, creating a line of fire that began climbing up the guard's arm. The smell of burning wool filled the air as the flames grew brighter and more dangerous. For the first time since Marcus had approached, the guard moved. His training kicked in as he immediately began trying to pat out the flames while maintaining his position as much as possible. But the fire was spreading faster than he could control, and his heavy ceremonial gloves made it difficult to effectively smother the flames. Marcus dropped his phone in shock, the device clattering to the ground, as he realized what had happened. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," he kept repeating, pressing himself against the railings and trying to help put out the fire he had started. But the metal bars prevented him from reaching the guard effectively, and his panic was making everything worse. The security officer, who had been approaching, broke into a run, speaking rapidly into his radio as chaos erupted around the palace gates. Other guards in the area moved quickly to assist their colleague, while tourists screamed and scattered in all directions. The peaceful morning scene had transformed into a nightmare, with Marcus at the center of it all, watching in horror as the consequences of his careless actions unfolded before his eyes. Marcus Henderson stepped off the tour bus at Buckingham Palace with his phone already recording. The 28-year-old software developer from Phoenix had saved for 2 years to take this London vacation, and he wasn't going to miss a single moment. His bright orange Arizona State t-shirt made him stand out among the more conservatively dressed tourists gathering near the palace gates. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as Marcus pushed through the crowd, determined to get the perfect shot of the famous red-coated guards. He had promised his girlfriend Sarah that he would bring back amazing photos, and the Instagram posts were already forming in his mind. The changing of the guard ceremony wouldn't start for another hour, but Marcus wanted to scope out the best filming positions. Excuse me, he muttered, squeezing past a group of elderly Japanese tourists who were taking careful, respectful photographs from a distance. Marcus had different plans. He had watched YouTube videos of other tourists getting close-up shots, and he was convinced he could do better. The guards never moved anyway, he reasoned. They were like statues in fancy uniforms. As he approached the ornate iron railings, Marcus noticed how perfectly still the nearest guard stood. The man's red tunic was immaculate, his black bearskin hat towering above his head, and his polished boots reflected the morning light. The guard's rifle was positioned at exactly the right angle, and his eyes stared straight ahead without the slightest movement. Marcus raised his phone and started recording a selfie video. "Hey everyone, Marcus here in London. I'm about to get the most amazing footage of these British guards. They say these guys never break character, no matter what happens. Let's see if that's really true." He grinned at his phone camera, completely unaware that several other tourists were backing away from him. The crowd around Marcus began to thin as people noticed his increasingly bold behavior. He stepped closer to the railings, then closer still, until he was practically pressed against the metal bars. The guard remained motionless, which only encouraged Marcus further. He started making funny faces at the camera while positioning, the guard in the background, treating the uniformed soldier like a prop in his personal show. "This is so cool," Marcus announced loudly to no one in particular. "These guys are like robots, watch this." He began waving his arms dramatically while filming, trying to create what he called epic content for his social media followers back home. The guard's discipline was absolute, but Marcus interpreted the lack of response as permission to continue. A security officer in a high-visibility vest approached from the distance, but Marcus was too focused on his filming to notice. He was already planning his next move, something that would really make his video go viral. The morning that had started with such promise was about to take a turn that would change Marcus's life forever, though he had no idea what was coming. The other tourists continued to move away, sensing trouble brewing, but Marcus remained oblivious to the growing tension around him. He was living in his own world of social media fame, completely disconnected from the reality of where he was and what he was about to do.